Beep, beep. Achieving a fat bass is one of life's best achievements, and in today's video I'm going to break down all the theory and also the practicality of using this theory to make a fat bass. So here I have a track where I'm using one of the presets from my Diva Deceiver Edition sound bank. Not a bad sound, but it could sound a lot better, a lot fatter. Now here's the first thing. In order to have fatness, you cannot have high frequencies. This is the first one. Have you ever heard of a fat dubstep wub or a fat electro house bass? No, you usually hear, oh, a fat tech house bass. So we first must define what fat means. And a lot of the times what people are talking about is a bass sound that has a lot of low end, a lot of mid lows, not a lot of mids or highs. Because the moment that mids or highs are introduced, you kill the illusion of a deep fat bass. Knowing this, you've already won half the battle because you can use an EQ to remove some of the highs, right? So watch what happens. Oh, okay. Again, I can't explain why this is. I'm pretty sure scientists have figured out how the human ear works. So there's probably an explanation for this. However, you also want to do this if you're working on music where you're going to have vocals on top, drums and stuff, because you want to leave some space for all those other elements to thrive. Which one makes you want to groove more? From there, the next thing a bass needs to have in order to sound fat, to sound good to you, is enough sustain. Okay, and this is a mistake that happens when you use poorly created presets or samples from Instagram ads. With this bass, we can agree that it has a rhythm. Dun, dun. The key with it though is that if I lower the decay down far enough, I mean, it still sounds like a bass, but it no longer sounds fat. Knowing a little bit of ADSR is very important in your journey to achieving that fat bass. So what I recommend you do is always have some form of sustain in the bass. So that way, in case you go too short, thick man on the decay, you at least have that, which you hear, backing you up. Because if it's not, it's gone. So you want to have enough sustain in the bass. That just means that it lasts long enough. It has a strong bass. It doesn't sound like boop. It sounds doom. Okay. You can still have rhythm to the bass with short decays, but make sure you're backing yourself up with enough sustain. If you ever hear someone saying a bass sounds fat, they don't mean that it has a lot of low end, aka sub. This does not sound fat to you. This sounds fat to you. Too much fatness is never good, right? So we can accentuate our mid-lows, and usually you want to use a broader band. Okay, now you feel the fatness. So the fatness comes from the mid-lows of the bass. It doesn't come from the mids or the highs. It comes from your mid-lows. Now the hard part here is deciding where the cutoff should be, but I'll leave that up to you and have a headache with that. But now you know. From there, the next step to a fat bass is saturation. Literally, if someone asks you, what's the number one thing I can do to get my bass to sound fat right now? Saturation. What's the easiest thing I can do? Saturation. Now, the best way to explain saturation is by utilizing a sine wave. It's just a fundamental. As you can see, it doesn't sound fat to you. It sounds subby, annoying. But the moment we saturate, we bring in new frequencies. Here we have the next overtone. Notice that as I boost it, you're going, that's fat. Subby, fat. Now, you have different types of saturation. But what I want you to know about saturation is that it's some crazy dude adding frequencies in a delicious way that colors the sound in a way that humans love. Back then, saturation was created by some dude clipping into a channel. And this was an analog channel. $80,000 mixing board, and then he was like, wow, this sounds better now because I'm clipping. F the purist. And then the world went on, right? So that's how saturation was created, and we use it to fatten up sounds because it utilizes, for instance, in the sine wave, the fundamental to dictate where the frequencies are added. So it's not random frequencies being added, it's harmonic frequencies. And if you know anything about harmonics, it makes chords and it sounds good. And again, the fatness isn't coming from that. It's coming from this. Now again, as long as I cover those high frequencies, which we talked about, this sounds fat. But the moment I let go of that, you kill the illusion. So from here, I'm gonna saturate this. Now our job, saturation, is simple to implement. It's not to fuck it up. So we're gonna use it there. The reason saturation makes stuff sound fatter as well is because it lowers down the CREST factor, which is the difference between your peak and your average loudness, or RMS. You can look at this, if you're in the best style in the world, Ableton, by looking at the peak, that little grayish green, and then the super bright green. The super bright green is the RMS, average loudness, and the peak is actually the peak, yeah, the gray, the green gray. Now, how do you get high CREST factors? Well, usually it's because it has a lot of dynamics. You can see that more dynamicful the sound gets, the more plucky you have more of it. But now watch what happens when I saturate it. I can lower it. And again, it's the difference between the gray green and the bright green. See, I lower it. We can put this in front, and lo and behold, whoa. See, that's an extreme example of making a fat bass out of a cheap thin bass that someone messed up in the patch. So again, hopefully this is helping. You're seeing how little things, bro. You don't need anything fancy. It's all about just knowing what fatness means, knowing what having a fat bass is all about to achieving that life goal. Also, we're lowering down the CREST factor, which means the bass doesn't have as much dynamics, but that's a good thing at certain times. If you're making classical music, or if the bass needs to be like that, then yeah, you're killing it. In majority of music, funk, anything with a bass guitar, you want that Last thing to add to this video to achieve fatness on a bass is by having the right sidechain and the right kick. When it comes to the sidechain, you don't want to have a long kick because that's going to kill the illusion of the fat bass. If you have a long kick, you have to sidechain this bass more. And look what happens when you do that. Versus you lose all the fatness. So you need to have the right kick and the right sidechain. So we're going to go with this kind of sidechain. Now I want to show you what a kick does to your bass fatness. Now again, this doesn't mean the kicks are bad or anything, because I mean these kicks work with certain bass lines, but not with our basses, right? So again, the kick you have is very, very important. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the like button. And if you want to support the channel, check out my sound design work. Over at evilsounds.com, my presets and samples are used by big producers like Hardwell, Mal P. James Hype uses them religiously. And I can keep going on about the artist, guys, but at the end of the day, the most important thing for me is giving you guys access to sounds that sound good, help you guys make the music that you love. If you want to further your knowledge forward, check this video out on how the pros make their leads sound epic, from bland to epic. You're going to learn stuff like, you know, dub delays on leads, pre-delay on reverbs, cool things using real tracks that are getting supported, obviously, getting bought. And I think that's the best way to learn. With that being said, you guys have a good night and peace out.